Hello everybody, I am PhenomSage, and welcome back to another Made in Abyss chapter review. Except this time, it's not really a chapter review. If you tuned into my Hosuki no Kuni review on Saturday, you'll know that I said that I would be skipping Made in Abyss this week in favor of working on some other videos that I've wanted to make but have been either procrastinating or I'm just taking too long to make it. So I wanted to take this week to spend my time and energy on that instead. But I didn't want to leave this Made in Abyss time slot just completely empty, so I thought of an idea for a video that I wanted to make after reading your guys' comments on the Bondrewd arc and all of my confusions regarding that arc. And there's a few things I want to bring up and clarify. I read a lot of your interpretations, a lot of your corrections, a lot of your clarifications. I want to talk about them. The first thing I wanted to say, though, before we even get into that, is that it's very interesting. I didn't realize this while reading Bondrewd's arc until after reading your guys' comments. This arc is so interpretive, more interpretive than anything we've gotten in the series so far. Up to this point, it's been very concrete, very grounded. Like, we know what the rules are, and we know the character motivations, and we have explanations for everything. In this arc, by the end of it, there's a lot of things that you're only left to your imagination for, like what certain characters were thinking when they did something, what they intended to do, what actually happened in the grand scheme of things. It can be a little bit confusing, and if I'm honest, I'm not really a fan of that kind of storytelling. I think that leaving some things up into interpretation and leaving them up to the reader's imagination is fine. I like that, but it should be done in moderation. And in this arc, I feel like there was just a little bit too much of not having things explained. And I'm a person who really likes having things explained. Obviously, that'll differ person to person. So if you like this arc and like that method of storytelling, that's fine. I still really enjoy the arc. It's just one of those things where I just imagine this arc being adapted, and if it does get a season 2, it's part of the reason why I want this Bondrewd arc to be adapted into a season 2 instead of a movie, is because I think you can do a lot with elaborating and explaining things more than they were explained while reading this arc. But without further ado, let's get into this. Let's get into all these corrections. Of course, since this is a very interpretive arc, I don't think a lot of these are the solid, concrete answers, but after reading your guys' comments, I've come to my own conclusions about what's going on here, straight up taking up some of your guys' answers, so forgive me for that, but you guys had some really good answers that ended up really clicking in my brain and making me say, oh, you know what, that totally makes sense to me. So that's what I'm going to be doing. I'm going to be using some of your guys' answers. Sometimes I came up with my own conclusions based on what you guys said, so it's a give and take. And this video isn't very structured. It's not really something that I'm going to be editing too much because, like I said, I want to focus on the other videos and writing that I'm doing. So forgive me for that. This video is not going to be nearly as edited down as my normal reviews. It's going to be just very freeform, just me talking, but I do have a list here, so it's not going to be completely unstructured. It's just going to be me going through each point that I have bulleted here. Oh, and also, forgive me if you can hear the dogs in the background. Not really much I can do about that. I hate where I live. So my biggest question at the end of this arc, the biggest confusion in my mind, was when I saw Bondrewd standing in front of the group as they depart for the 6th layer, and I was like, wait, what is going on here? Why is he there? And second of all, why is Nanachi saying his ambition is ended if he's right there and could easily start doing his experiments again and performing? Like, all he has to do is raise another child to become another hollow in another form. So what is going on here? Why is there no explanation for this? There's a lot going on here, so let's just break it down. For one, the Zoaholic confirmed, somebody told me this in the comments, Akihito confirmed that the Zoaholic was not destroyed, which means when he was killed in his hollow form, he just transferred to another body. That is Bondrewd standing there. That was pretty obvious. I did get that Bondrewd had transferred his consciousness because we hadn't seen the Zoaholic destroyed at that point. He easily could have transferred over to a new body, and he did, which is why it's confusing that Nanachi is saying your ambition ends here. You're done. Like, why? He could just start over again. And that brings me to the second point, something that I didn't even realize while I was reading until it was made clear to me. Edo Front is basically destroyed. There was a shot in the manga that I misinterpreted as just the natural shape of Edo Front, because when you see that first shot of Edo Front, when the group first enters the 5th layer and they get to it, it looks almost like a donut shape. It looks like a spinning donut, and I thought that there was like this center part that was just hollow, and that's why that was there. And then, so when Reg fired his incinerator blast in Berserk Reg form, and we see that shot of Nanachi just overlooking this cliff, and you see just this big donut-shaped area in Edo Front. My first thought when I saw Nanachi just overlooking this giant hole inside Edo Front, I thought that that was the natural shape of Edo Front. I didn't realize that this was the product, the result of Reg firing his incinerator when he was in his Berserk form. So you'll understand my confusion when I was thinking, wait, what do you mean? That incinerator blast maybe destroyed a room and the wall, and maybe ended up resulting in the floor being busted, so he dropped through to the 6th layer. But there's not really much else going on here. He still has a ridiculous amount of facilities and resources to work with. He's going to be fine even after this. Like, he can still continue his experiments. But no, that incinerator blast destroyed a good chunk of Edo Front, meaning a lot of Bondrewd's resources are gone. They're just not there anymore, and he would have to rebuild from scratch. And I'm going to be honest, I don't think he's going to do it at all. I don't think he cares at this point. Which leads me into my next point. I just think Bondrewd straight up has given up on his aspiration to reach the bottom of the abyss. Assuming that was his aspiration, I assume that's what he wanted a hollow form for, was that so he could reach the bottom of the abyss and still come back up with the knowledge of whatever's down there. But I think at this point he has given up. One, because half of his base is destroyed or more, meaning all of his resources are gone. He has lost Prushka, the thing that he has nurtured and cared for and built up for years, just so he could attain his hollowed form, which he lost, and he would have to restart that from scratch as well. And thirdly, and I think this is the most important to Bondrewd's character and the discussion that he has with Nanachi, I just think that Bondrewd has straight up admitted defeat to Nanachi, and has admitted and accepted that Riko, Reg, and Nanachi's ambition and aspiration is greater than his. Their drive to reach the bottom of the abyss has beaten his drive. That's my explanation for all this anyways, is that I just think Bondrewd feels defeated. He feels spiritually defeated to the point where he has given up on what he was doing. And like he says in his final dialogue to Nanachi, his new aspiration is seeing them reach the bottom of the abyss, which I think is very fitting to his character, and I like that direction. And I know it's not like confirmed, but I feel like this is the likely direction that Akihito maybe had intended for Bondrewd's character, is just somebody who admits and realizes that he lost and accepts it gracefully. He's fine with losing. He's fine with losing to their ambition, and he just wants to see where they go now. I saw some theories saying that Bondrewd's only intention was to test out Reg's power, and that he feels like he won in the end just because he did what he set out to do. He gained a hollow form and he tested out a treasure of the abyss. I would completely disagree with that. I don't think Bondrewd's intention was to gain a hollow form and just lose it immediately. He definitely intended to go further down into the abyss with that hollow form. I don't think that that was his intention at all. I just think that he's fine with losing. He did lose. He never won. That's not a question. He did lose. I just think he accepted it very well. He doesn't really mind that he lost because he realizes that Nanachi's ambition outclasses his, and he just wants to see where she goes from here. Another question I had regarding the ending that I even posed during my replies to all of your guys' comments, because I was still not understanding it until a certain comment just brought to light, I think, what is going on here, is why would Riko's choice be to just leave, to go down to the 6th layer and leave Bondrewd behind and let him assumedly continue his experiments with no worries at all? Why would she do that? She doesn't know what Bondrewd is thinking at this time. She doesn't know that he has given up. I think only Nanachi knows that, but even Nanachi felt compelled that Bondrewd should be dead and should pay for his crimes, but is going along with Riko's wish just because she's the captain, she's the one guiding our team. So why would Riko leave Bondrewd behind? And a lot of you guys just chalked it up to Riko and Reg and Nanachi. Their intention was never to confront Bondrewd. Their intention was never to destroy his base or stop his experiments. They just want to continue further. But I would argue that after losing both Mitty and now Prushka to this fiend, that they would feel some kind of animosity towards Bondrewd, and especially in a state where Reg has 10 charges of his incinerator left, and Bondrewd is practically defenseless at this time. He no longer has his hollow body, he doesn't have any of his well-equipped praying hands, he's defenseless and weak right now. Why would they just not finish the job right now? And I was wondering about this for a long time until I realized what is going on with this life reverberating stone and what is going on with Riko. And my explanation for this is that Riko now feels the energy and will of Prushka through this life reverberating stone. We get a few shots of Riko being able to feel Prushka's life energy, it seems like, from the stone. And my explanation for this, for why Riko would leave Bondrewd behind in the first place, despite all the atrocities he's committed, I would argue that the reason she leaves him behind is because Prushka's will and Prushka's wish is for Bondrewd to stay alive, not just stay alive, but also to watch our team go and continue down further to the bottom of the abyss, in a way almost like he was accompanying us on our journey along with Prushka. One correction that I want to make that I just feel absolutely silly for getting wrong is when we see the life reverberating stone come out, and I was like, what is that? What is that shape? And my natural assumption, just from the appearance, was to say that it looks like a squid, and I was like, wait, what does that have to do with anything here? What is going on? And a lot of you said that that shape is actually the shape of an actual heart, like a physical heart in your body. And that makes a lot of sense looking at that. My confusion mostly came from the fact that the white whistles that we've seen so far in the series have had these very unique, very weird and wacky designs. So when looking at Prushka's remains in a box, I didn't think it would be so on the nose that the life reverberating stone would literally be a heart. I thought that that shape had some kind of meaning. But that's the way it is. That makes a lot more sense in my squid theory, so that's what we're going with. And I heard that it will be explained later in the future what's going on with that, so I'm looking forward to learning about that as well. Alright, now we're going to get into the really interpretive stuff. The stuff that really just does no concrete evidence supporting any of it, but these are my takes on what's going on here, and some of them are your guys' takes that I just realized, hey, that makes sense. So, for one, during the review, I questioned why Bondrewd has these eye tendrils and why he has this tail if he hasn't turned into a hollow yet, because my initial explanation for why he had that stuff is that I had thought he had already transformed into a hollow and that he had other intentions for Prushka and this overall arc, but he hadn't turned into a hollow yet, so what is going on with his body? Why is he like this? A lot of you guys chalked it up to the fact that maybe it's because Bondrewd had used the Zoaholic so many times that he ended up just transforming into a different beast altogether. I don't think that's the case. I don't think the Zoaholic would affect your physical state at all. It's purely just your soul being spread across multiple bodies. I initially even chalked it up to maybe Bondrewd spread his soul into a non-human being, and that's why he looked the way he did. But then again, I don't know if that makes too much sense. I don't know if he would even be able to speak English if that was the case. So my main explanation for this came from a few of you guys saying that one of the praying hands that we see during this arc, who showed up right after the incinerator blast from Berserk Reg and knocked him down into the 6th layer, that praying hand had 4 arms. And it's natural to assume that with all the experiments Bondrewd has been doing, that he might have been experimenting on not only the praying hands, which is why that guy had 4 hands, but also that he had been experimenting on himself in a way, maybe experimenting on his eyes for a reason, maybe the tail is something else he experimented himself on. I don't know. That also raises another question I had. Is the tail that he has legit? Is that an actual tail, or is it a mechanical tail? Some of you guys said mechanical, some of you said it's organic. I honestly don't know. I think there's a clue though. When he transforms into a hollow, the tail that he had sprouts fur, which I don't think would happen if that tail wasn't organic, unless somehow the tail that he grew from being a hollow just grew out into that same shape. It could go either way, I have no idea, but I feel like it's more likely that it's an organic tail, since we already saw those eye tendrils. Like, there's no limit to what Bondrewd has been doing on himself. I also questioned why Reg turned into this berserk state when taking in too much power, when on the surface he took in too much power and only lost his memory, but didn't really transform into like this scary beast. So what is going on here? I saw a really interesting explanation for this, saying that it might be because on the surface he had 0 charge. He was basically dead. He was in a unconscious state because he had no energy left. So the energy that he took in on the surface brought him back to 100%. But down in Edofront, he wasn't at 0%. He had some charge left. He had some energy left. So maybe the fact that he turned into Berserk Reg is because he took in more energy than he could handle. He took in more that raised him above 100% energy capacity, and that ended up transforming him into what we saw. I think that makes a lot of sense, and I think that might explain why he was in Berserk Reg form for that amount of time and then ended up transforming once he fired his incinerator blast, because that incinerator blast took up enough energy to get him back down to 100%. That makes sense to me. That's what I'm going with. Obviously no concrete information about what's going on there, but that makes sense to me. And finally, I made a big mistake regarding the cartridges and how they are made. I completely misinterpreted what they meant, and I think I actually got it the complete opposite of what they meant. I said in the review that the cartridges were made by taking out all the sensory organs of a person and putting them into the box along with the brain and everything else you need, because my thinking behind that was that you want those sensory organs inside the cartridge because that's what's being affected by the Abyss, especially the 5th layer. Like, all of your senses are being bombarded by the Curse of the Abyss. That is what's being affected. So that was my thinking when I thought, oh, okay, so they're taking out those sensory organs to attract the Abyss even further. But no, they're removing those. They're removing basically anything that isn't necessary to keeping the person alive. And somebody told me it was like the brain, the spine, and then like some bones or something, and that was basically it. I don't know how you survive on just the brains and the bones and no sensory organs at all. I think you might need a stomach in there too. I don't know. I have no idea what's going on here, but I don't know how. I'm not a doctor. I don't know how that would work in practice, but that is the case. The Bondrewd is only removing the bare necessity to keep the person alive and make sure that the Abyss recognizes them as a person. So that's basically everything that I have an answer to that you guys gave me comments for. Thank you guys so much for explaining all that stuff to me. You guys were really good and long comments that really helped elaborate on things in this arc that I just did not understand at all. That being said, there are still a lot of questions left that even you guys couldn't answer regarding what's going on here, and I did see a few explanations here, but I wanted to pose these questions again anyways because I still think they're very interesting. For one, How was the praying hand on the 4th layer able to maintain sentience and talk to Reg and Rico and just the group in that Forbidden Flower Garden? Like, how did he maintain that sentience and that just consciousness if we learned that the Zoaholic just does not work on transferring layers? Like, it just goes wrong, we heard. It just doesn't work. And my question also continues, because I did see a good explanation for that, saying that it might be that Bondrewd transfers part of a soul or part of the consciousness into this dude, sends him up to the 4th layer, meaning that that soul is already in there, that consciousness is already in there, so it's fine. It wouldn't really affect the Zoaholic. The Zoaholic only has problems when it's trying to transfer a consciousness to something on another layer. So that makes complete sense to me, but my question continues, saying, why would the praying hand on the 4th layer refer to Bondrewd as a separate person if that is Bondrewd himself? We see this praying hand referring to Bondrewd as a completely different person, almost as if he's serving that person. So what is it about this consciousness and this soul that isn't Bondrewd anymore? Why is it thinking this way, and how does it still have enough sentience to actually have a conversation? Like, most of the praying hands that we've seen that haven't had Bondrewd's consciousness in it, I mean, they all have Bondrewd's consciousness, but not to this degree where they're able to maintain a conversation. Why is this happening here? Like, why is he talking this way? And why is he not referring to himself as Bondrewd? You could easily just chalk that up to storytelling. You don't want to reveal that plot element too soon. But it is confusing and kind of interesting thinking about what's going on here with the Zoaholic and Bondrewd's soul inside this praying hand. And finally, my last question that I want to pose to you guys, something that I didn't even consider until it was brought up to me in the comments by Haruhi. Thank you for this question. I did not understand what was going on with this when you brought this up. I couldn't even give a decent explanation for why this would be the case. We learned that Bondrewd, during his explanation about the white whistles and about why he can't transform himself into a cartridge because he's already spread his consciousness so much, the Abyss doesn't recognize him as a human anymore. We learn that he can't turn himself into a cartridge either because the Abyss doesn't recognize himself as a human, meaning that if he were to turn any of his bodies into a cartridge, it just wouldn't work because the Abyss doesn't recognize it as a soul, or like it wouldn't affect those cartridges in the same way that just a separate human soul would be affected. So the question now is, why does Bondrewd have to worry about the Curse of the Abyss at all anymore then? If his soul isn't recognized by the Abyss, why does he even need to be turned into a hollow to survive the 6th layer curse? And if that was the case, he wouldn't have to worry about the curse at all anymore since he's not recognized as a human. The Abyss considers him mindless, like the Abyss ignores his presence and doesn't apply the curse to any bodies that he transforms into a cartridge. So why would he have to worry about that in the first place? Food for thought, food for thought. I'm interested in hearing your guys' thoughts and explanations for those questions. I honestly couldn't tell you what the explanation for that is, other than Akihito didn't know what to do with that. I have no idea. You guys always come up with really cool explanations for what's going on with certain things that I don't understand. So I'm interested in hearing your guys' thoughts. But that'll about do it for this video. Just a nice little video covering all the corrections and clarifications I wanted to make, pose a few extra questions I didn't bring up in the review, and that'll be about it. Stay tuned next week for the Made in Abyss Chapter 39 review. That's going to be fun. Hope you guys aren't too disappointed with waiting a week for that, just because I gave you guys 5 chapters last week. Let's get real now. You can wait another week to continue into that 6th layer. I just really need to focus on some of the other projects and videos that I'm working on. So I hope you guys understand. Thank you guys so much for the support, the comments, the likes, everything. I really appreciate it. And of course, as always, have a great day.